Workers are about to be hit with the highest average income tax rate in our history. Canberra is lining the pockets of the elite while making everyday Australians pick up the tab. Think about that. Taxpayers are covering almost half the cost of an EV for the highest earners.
Imagine working your guts out as a nurse, earning $90,000 a year, and discovering that a lawyer earning twice as much gets a bigger tax discount on their Tesla than you do, courtesy of your own tax dollars. Welcome to the insane world of Australian tax policy, where the government has just hit working families with the highest average income tax rate in our nation's history, while simultaneously handing out luxury car subsidies to the wealthy elite. This isn't just about numbers on a spreadsheet, mate. This is about a government that's bleeding the country dry with $1 trillion debt, hiring public servants like there's no tomorrow, and creating a system where ordinary Australians are forced to subsidise the lifestyles of people who earn more in a month than most families see in a year. The most outrageous part? While hard-working Australians are getting smashed with record tax rates, the government is spending $560 million a year. That's over 1,000% more than budgeted, to help wealthy professionals buy luxury electric vehicles. It's welfare for the rich, paid for by the people who can least afford it. And this is just the beginning. With government debt racing toward $1 trillion and spending growing faster than a bushfire in summer, the tax burden on ordinary Australians is only going to get worse. The government has created a system where more than half the population depends on them for income, making real reform almost impossible. It's a racket, and working families are paying the price. Before we expose how the government is using your tax dollars to subsidise luxury cars for lawyers while nurses get slugged with record tax rates, if you want uncensored analysis of Australia's economic disaster, join our Patreon. We're the resistance fighting back against policies that rob working families to pay for elite welfare. Link in the description. Let's start with the shocking numbers that prove Australian workers are being hit harder than ever before. According to the OECD, Australia recorded a 7.6% increase in average tax rates last year, the largest increase of all 38 developed countries in the world. Think about that for a second. Out of every wealthy nation on earth, Australia hit its workers the hardest. The average Australian without children now pays 24.9% of their gross wage in income tax. That's nearly $25,000 a year for someone on average wages. But here's where it gets really brutal. If you're earning 2/3 of the average wage, about $67,000, which describes millions of Australian families, you're now paying 20.2% in tax. That's the highest tax burden for middle-income earners since the year 2000. Meanwhile, someone earning $166,000, the lawyers, consultants and senior public servants, they're paying 34%. But here's the twisted part. Thanks to government subsidies and tax breaks, many of these high earners are actually getting more government support than the nurses and teachers struggling on middle incomes. The bracket creep is destroying working families. As inflation pushes up wages, people get pushed into higher tax brackets without actually being better off. So you get a pay rise to keep up with the cost of living, but the government takes a bigger slice, leaving you worse off than before. It's a hidden tax increase that hits hardest when families are already struggling. Now let's talk about where all this tax money is going, because the numbers will make your blood boil. Australia's national debt is racing toward $1 trillion. That's $1,000 billion that future generations will have to pay back with interest.
And today, our national debt sits at about $1 trillion. Government spending is at levels we've only seen in wartime or national crisis.
Government spending is growing at 5.7% in real terms this year, taking the spending to GDP ratio to its highest level since the mid-1980s. But here's the insane part. The only economic indicator that's been upgraded in the government's forecasts is spending. Everything else, economic growth, household spending, business investment has been downgraded. So we're spending more money we don't have on a weaker economy that's producing less wealth. It's like maxing out your credit cards while your income is falling. Any family that managed their finances this way would be bankrupt within months. The Australian Industry Group did an analysis that should terrify every taxpayer. Of the 470,000 jobs created in Australia over the past year, 85% were ultimately taxpayer supported. That means for every 6 new jobs, 5 of them are being paid for by the taxpayers, rather than creating wealth in the private sector. This is completely unsustainable. We're creating a massive class of people whose livelihoods depend on government spending, while the productive sector that actually creates wealth gets smaller and smaller. It's like a pyramid scheme where the government keeps hiring more people to manage the people they hired last year. But nothing demonstrates the government's warped priorities like their electric vehicle policy disaster. They budgeted $55 million a year to exempt electric vehicles from fringe benefit tax. The actual cost? $560 million, a blowout of over 1,000%.
A great example is Labor's electric vehicle policy. They made it exempt from fringe benefit tax. It was budgeted to cost the government $50 million a year, but it's blown out by over 1,000% to $560 million. And in another few years, it will cost $1.3 billion.
Here's how this outrageous policy works in practice. A nurse earning $90,000 a year who wants to lease a Tesla Model Y through her employer pays $687 a month, but a lawyer earning $200,000 pays just $552 a month for the exact same car. Over the life of the lease, the lawyer pockets an extra $8,000 in discounts compared to the nurse. And guess who's paying for it? The taxpayers, including the nurse herself. She's literally subsidising a luxury car for someone who earns more than twice as much as she does. This policy provides zero benefit to the country. It doesn't reduce emissions in any meaningful way, it doesn't create jobs in productive industries, and it doesn't help working families. It's pure welfare for the wealthy, designed to make rich people feel good about their environmental virtue, while ordinary Australians pay the bill. The Productivity Commission called it a policy that disproportionately favours the wealthy, but the government doesn't care. They'd rather spend over $500 million a year helping lawyers and consultants buy luxury cars than reduce the tax burden on working families. Here's the most dangerous part of what's happening. The government has created a system where more than half of voters now rely on them for most of their income, whether it's public sector wages, welfare payments, or various subsidies and handouts. Over 50% of Australians are now financially dependent on government spending.
More than half of voters now rely on the government for most of their income through public sector wages, welfare, or other subsidies.
This makes real economic reform almost impossible. When you try to cut spending or reduce the size of government, you're threatening the livelihoods of millions of voters. It's like trying to diet when half your family works at a chocolate factory. There's always going to be resistance to doing what's necessary. Shadow Treasurer Ted O'Brien put it perfectly.
No more giveaways, no more gravy trains, no more government-funded boondoggles. No more creating entire industries that serve as a constituency for their own preservation to the detriment of the greater good. Australians can no longer afford such indulgences. It is time that we get serious.
But the problem is that these industries and constituencies have become so large and politically powerful that they can block any attempt at reform. The green energy sector, the expanded NDIS, the university sector with their debt forgiveness schemes, they've all become massive vested interests that will fight tooth and nail to protect their government funding. It's not the poor or genuinely disadvantaged who are benefiting from most of this spending. It's the university-educated elite getting thousands wiped off their HEX debt, the multi-billion-dollar energy companies getting green subsidies, and the wealthy professionals getting tax breaks on luxury cars.
We think many of the changes they made the last term will actually reduce productivity even further, including changes to many of the casual things, the gig economy, the regulation of the gig economy was really over the top, and they're continuing to pursue that.
While the government has been on this spending spree, Australia's productivity has completely collapsed. We've had zero productivity growth since the pandemic, which means we're not creating more wealth per hour worked. That's why living standards are declining even as people work harder and longer. The mid-year economic and fiscal outlook revealed that Treasury modelling shows productivity continues to be unhelpfully weak. That's bureaucrat speak for we're in serious trouble. When productivity doesn't grow, wages can't sustainably increase, living standards stagnate, and the only way to fund government spending is through higher taxes. Business investment expectations remain very weak because companies can see what's happening. Why would you invest in expanding your business when the government is taking an ever larger share of the economy, hiring workers away from productive industries and creating regulatory barriers that make it harder to operate? The government's own forecasts show economic growth, household spending and exports have all been downgraded. The only thing growing is government spending and debt. It's like watching a family that responds to financial problems by going on a shopping spree with the credit card. The mainstream media won't tell you how the government is using record tax rates to fund luxury car subsidies for the wealthy, or how they've created a dependency system that makes reform almost impossible. They won't explain how 85% of new jobs are taxpayer funded, or how productivity collapse is destroying living standards. Join our Patreon for uncensored analysis of Australia's economic disaster and the policies that are robbing working families to pay for elite welfare. This isn't sustainable, and it's not fair. Australian families are being hit with the highest tax rates in our history to fund a system that benefits everyone except them. While nurses subsidise lawyers' luxury cars and teachers pay for consultants' tax breaks, the government keeps spending money we don't have on programs that don't work. The solution is obvious but politically difficult. Slash government spending, stop hiring more public servants, cut income tax for working families, end the green welfare for billionaire energy companies, and unleash Australia's natural resource potential. But with over half the population now dependent on government spending, finding the political will to make these changes seems almost impossible. The question is whether we'll act before the system collapses under its own weight, or whether we'll keep pretending that we can tax and spend our way to prosperity while the productive economy withers away beneath us. To see the latest Australian crisis, click this video here.